Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back, everyone. This gentleman has given us so much insight on something that we take for granted, and that's what's around us, our infrastructure, how the roads are built, the rails are built, how housing happens around us, and major decisions have to be made all the time, all planning for the future. He has been an urban and regional planner at the University of Pittsburgh for many, many years, and we make him our Hall of Fame recipient today, one of three. So great to have him back with us. Richard Golden Bickel Jr. is on the program. How are you doing today?
Very good, Steve. How are you?
Fantastic. We have a bunch of emails I want to get to in just a moment. Before we even go there, I wanted to put a little bit of a focus on rail transportation, and I had a thought. I was watching a few movies the other night, and how in Japan and other countries, they have what's known as the bullet train, high-speed trains. It's kind of their way of life, aside from the fact that they're clean and beautiful. Why is it that here in the United States, we don't have that? We don't, they're working on it. California, there's always been talk about building high-speed rail, billions spent, miles to go, still hasn't happened, and maybe some other states as well. But why is that not materialized in the United States?
Well, I think the fundamental problem is lack of funding to do the job right. And California embarked on this saga to develop high-speed rail and made the decision to start at the rural part of the route, and they're still struggling with that, and now they're getting into the more developed part of the route, and now they're running into NIMBY problems, not in my backyard, and impacts with existing development.
Yeah, I never thought of that, and you've mentioned not in my backyard before, where even if it's not physically in your backyard, that high-speed rail could be going through your town, and there's a lot of pushback on that. Yeah, you know what? I never considered that.
Yeah, the concept of transit-oriented development applies to high-speed rail too. It's not just public transit, and the opportunity is to use the rail line as an incentive to develop around the stations and promote economic development and jobs. The issue is, do you have the funds to do it? Do you have the funds to create mitigation that will satisfy people's concerns? And all that is difficult. And you also have an administration now that is a little less friendly to public transit than the previous one. And so the Department of Transportation is sometimes not as much of an advocate as the previous administration.
If you had the magic slate in front of you and the magic pen, and you could write down whatever you wanted, and we could snap our finger and make it happen in a relatively short amount of time, what would it be?
Well, it would, first of all, it would take infrastructure investments and revitalize older cities and towns to bring them up to a better standard. And at the same time, it would have money for new projects, as long as they were carefully planned and within budgets, rather than becoming boondoggles that create a bad image. They would be supportive of economic development goals.
The one thing I do wonder about is, as you said, updating smaller towns, maybe with not a fantastic infrastructure because they're an older town. That you could have that NIMBY situation, rolling through those towns as well. Right.
When I worked at the Public Transit Agency in Philadelphia, SEPTA, I went to a meeting in a local township, and that was the key concern. of the adjacent business owners and some of the residents. What are you going to do to our town? How is it going to change? How is it going to impact my lifestyle? These are legitimate concerns that people have, and you've got to have at least try to answer their concerns, or you're going to be out on your ear, because the local officials will need to respond to their constituents, even if they have the vision to create new transit-oriented development projects.
I want to go to an email we got, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. And this comes from Jess, who says, in Reno, Nevada, by the way, how important has community engagement been in your work, and how do you approach it effectively?
Community engagement is essential. If you ignore it, your project's not going to go anywhere. And the way to approach it is to use innovative public involvement techniques, which weren't around when I started working in the 70s. There's much more that can be done now with videos and interesting graphics that can convey what you're trying to do, which in the past we usually had a public hearing and made a pitch through slide presentations, and that was it. Well, now you've got all kinds of techniques to engage the public and to get your message across.
And I guess I would imagine as you engage people and get that message across, it's going to be clearer and more easy for people to understand with newer technology, right?
Yes, but that doesn't replace the sometimes NIMBY reactions of people who are satisfied with their town as it is, but they also want the economic development and new growth. It's a conflict.
So I have an interesting question I believe is going to make you think for a moment. And this one comes from Christine, Searsport, Maine. She says, I'm considering a career in your field. What does a typical day or week look like for somebody in urban planning?
A lot depends on where you work in terms of the level of government and the existing characteristics of the area. I started working at Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, at the County Planning Commission, which is about 500 plus square miles just west of Philadelphia. It had a variety of towns, 62 townships and boroughs, and they ranged from rural farmland to urban, gritty towns like Norristown, the county seat. And you could go 5 miles in any direction and have 3 or 4 different planning issues to deal with. And that was interesting because I was a community planner and I used to go to night meetings and meet with local officials and local planning commission members. And that's where you get a feel for planning, not just at the 10,000-foot level where you can make a map and it looks great, but you're down in the trenches dealing with real-world issues. So I was very fortunate to start my career at that kind of a setting. Wow.
How does the day vary? I mean, it really comes down to the project that you're working on, but can you the typical day, I'm trying to visualize, I'm you, I show up for work, it's 9 a.m. Every day is going to be different. I totally get that. But can you give me an idea about that?
Yeah, it was 8:30 a.m. And we only worked at the county. It was about 7-hour day, so I left at 4:30. And during that time, a lot got accomplished because we had to work with our graphics department with some initial computers that were around and develop population and employment forecasts and come up with plans that people would take a look at and try to understand. And so you couldn't just go off in a corner. At the same time, you had the opportunity to work in a variety of settings, but your office is very important. The office, you have your planning colleagues, you have your executive director and the senior planners, and so there was always something going on and always something interesting. You have staff meetings, you have meetings out of the office, not just on projects but on other issues, and I found it to be fascinating for someone who went to school in Pittsburgh but was from New York, born in New York City, didn't work, but I was in school in Glen Cove, Long Island, and then ended up in Pittsburgh for undergraduate and graduate school. So it was a totally different setting, and I didn't know anything about planning. When I took an urban geography course as a junior, having realized I wasn't going to be a doctor, as many people realize, and found that urban geography was a good entree into planning. So I stayed at Pitt and started the graduate school and finished my degree 2 years later.
Now we're centering on Pennsylvania, where you spent the greater part of your career. How does Pennsylvania differ from other states? Is there, a lot of the same, or are many states very different?
Many states are different. Pennsylvania is a local government state. Every square inch of 3,600 square miles is townships, boroughs, and cities. And I probably gave you the wrong number of the square miles, but every square inch of land is under a local jurisdiction or a county jurisdiction or both. And so you've got to deal with local zoning requirements, development requirements, and different governing bodies that are controlling what you're doing. So a planner cannot just walk into a room and say, "This is my plan." You've got to accept it. They have to sell it. And by selling it, I mean they have to use facts, figures, graphics, and maps to describe what they want, what's there now, mm-hmm. and what they want to do to change the landscape and the character of the community.
So I've got an interesting one here, and this is from Dave, who is in West Palm Beach, Florida. He says, "I find this career path fascinating." He says, "Can you walk me through a roadway project that you've worked on from planning to implementation?"
Well, it's the big road projects start 1 year and finish maybe 25 years later, unfortunately. But for a little project, I worked in a community called East Norriton Township, next to the county seat, Norristown, and it was called the Rahway Avenue Improvement Project. And the idea was to connect this minority neighborhood to the rest of the township because the roads were truncated. They weren't completed. And so I went to that first meeting and said, well, we would like to take these roads and create through routes and make it a better circulation pattern. They said, we don't want that. We're very happy to be somewhat isolated because it's a safer environment for our children and it's a relatively quiet pace of life. I'm talking about a relatively small neighborhood, not a large area.
Sure.
And so as a result of that feedback from the local people, I developed a plan for that area that did not connect the main road through the middle to the surrounding street pattern because I sympathized with what they were saying. If that, it would have become a shortcut for people who knew about it and would have increased the traffic through that neighborhood And so that, to me, was an example right off the bat when I started working of how you've got to listen to the local residents.
It really does get down to the community level for a lot of this. I mean, and on the other side, being a resident, many, I'm sure, feel that their voice isn't being heard, right?
Yeah, that's the common refrain that, oh, the planners, you're just here to work with the elected officials and impose something on us. But I think elected officials have learned over the years that they've got to listen too, and that the best way to accomplish something is to work with the neighborhood, especially if they're organized, and have a spokesperson to get things done. Otherwise, they can be an impediment to doing anything.
Now, we're talking about roads here. I've always wondered, what role does data like traffic counts, crash reports, call them speed studies, how much of that plays a role in your decision-making for those roadway projects?
Well, that's very important, because if you're dealing with roads and bridges, you're going to be dealing with the State Department of Transportation or the county department, and they rely on those data sources to generate travel demand that justifies a project. Just like population and employment numbers give you a portrait of the community as to where it is today and where it's going to go in the future, travel demand numbers tell you what's going on. Are there problems out there? Where are the problem intersections? Where are the dangerous intersections? And they're the population and employment numbers that are needed for transportation projects.
Was it easy getting that data, from other, I guess, parts of the municipality? Do they freely give that information, the traffic counts, the crash reports and such, or you have to work at that?
You can generate numbers by using up-to-date surveys. That's why consultants often come in and do surveys on top of the data sources that are out there. The census is the primary source for population, and there are employment statistics. There are traffic counts that are taken periodically, whether there's a project or not, because the state DOT wants to know what's going on out there. So those numbers are critical.
Let me take a look here. Rafer is in Santa Fe and says, I'm a junior in high school and looking at different career paths, and goes on to say, actually has two questions. The first one is, do you get to work more in an office, out in the field, or both?
Thank goodness both, because I would not have been happy just spending my day in an office for 7 to 8 hours. So planning is a job that you have to get out and meet people and see things to help you develop your ideas for improvements and plans. And so it's a very important part of the job.
So, and Rafer also says, if I want to explore urban planning now, are there any activities, clubs, or projects I can try as a student? I guess that's a tough one. It depends on where you are, but any thoughts on that?
One information source is the American Planning Association, which is the professional and citizen organization for planning issues. And they're located in Chicago, and you can get on their mailing list. And for a modest amount, you can join as a member, and then start on the process of becoming what's called an AICP, American Institute of Certified Planners, and then above that is the FAICP, Fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners, if you're that serious about it. And that's what I eventually got. And it's a very interesting and worthwhile organization. They have a monthly magazine called Planning, and Planning is a glossy publication that describes what's going on around the country in certain planning issues.
What would you want somebody to know, like Rafer, who is, says that in high school, looking at some different career paths, what would you want them to know?
Well, if they're exploring career paths, I would say engineering is an interesting profession to get into. It was too technical for me. I didn't want to do it. Planning is a little bit of technical and a little bit of non-technical, and it's a balance. The landscape architecture, if you're interested in design and don't want to be an architect, that's another profession that you could get into, and is very supportive of planning goals and objectives.
If you were to look back, and if you made a change, if you were to make a change, would there be anything that you would have looked at Richard and said, you know what, I could probably have done this a little bit differently. I could have done that differently. Anything stand out for you?
Yes, I was very deficient in getting into planning the planning concepts after spending a couple of years thinking about medicine. And so I didn't take an economics course when I left Pitt. But what I did is I bought a textbook called Samuelson's Economics, and I started reading that textbook and learned about some fundamental principles in that way. And so there's always self-study you can do, but nowadays the curriculum for planning is probably broader than it was when I was in school, and you can be exposed to many of these things through the planning curriculum or the prerequisites for getting into planning school.
I truly appreciate all your insight that you provide with decades of experience, and it's interesting that we look at it two ways. We look at it in terms of what's going on in our world now. You always have your finger on the pulse of that in terms of transportation, whatever it might be, but also on the career path. And apparently it resonates because we get responses. I'm going to just throw it out there. Instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. If you want to reach out, you have a question for Richard in the future. Thank you so much for being here today. Truly appreciate it. And congrats on being one of our Hall of Fame recipients. Well deserved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. We'll be right back.
All right. Bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.